Thanks, Joe. So yeah, as Joe says, feel free to just to ask questions on chat, and Joe will field them to me, because the 8 series is there's so much to it. I could pretty much talk all day about this, but you don't want to hear me rattle on for all days. So I'm going to start off with, it seems the majority of you have some level of familiarity with the 8 series, or your owners already. I will give a very quick brief overview of what the 8 series is, but I sort of really want to get more into the details and navigate menus, talk about routing, talk about the controller side of it. The 8 series is without doubt our most powerful system that we've ever developed by a factor of 100. I mean, it really is. It's a very powerful FPGA system, that can handle a lot of recording tracks. It can mix multiple buses. It's got a whole range of USB controllers. So you can configure the system in the way you want to control it in many different ways. There's wireless control via Bluetooth. There's USB control. There's just so many things. And obviously you've got all the obvious stuff like timecode and multiple media recording, all that sort of stuff. So let's just quickly just describe the 3 models so that people have an idea of what the 8 series is. So we have the 833, which is the baby of the family, but don't be misled. It's a very capable baby. It has 8 channels and 4 mix tracks. So you've got a total of 12 record tracks and 8 channels. Then the next model up is your 888, which is a 16 channel, 20 track mixer recorder. And then you've got the daddy of the family, which is a 32 channel, 36 track recorder mixer. Now, the Scorpio is primarily aimed at cart-based work because of its such huge range of I/O, and that, although it can be used over the shoulder because it is still pretty compact for a 32-channel, 36-track recorder, but mainly aimed at large events, big productions. The Scorpio is ideal for that. It has 32 channels of Dante and many outputs, many inputs, so it really does lend itself to the most complex of productions, whether they're live or in a studio or what have you. The 833, the baby, is obviously perfect for the bag. Very compact, but in certain scenarios, it would work on a cart as well. It's still 8 channel. It can be used with controllers, small controllers, so you could set it up pretty nicely there. But really, if you're looking for a balance between the 833 and the Scorpio, the 888 is the perfect compromise. It's compact enough to work really well in a bag, and it's powerful enough and has enough I/O and routing capabilities to handle pretty complex productions. So yeah, you want to evaluate, if you're interested in buying an 8 series, you really want to evaluate it. Look at the I/O, look at the number of channels, look at the number of tracks, and look at the size. Essentially though, all 3 models have an identical architecture. They have exactly the same feature set. There's just more I/O and more channels and more mixed tracks on the higher models. The only other difference between the 888 and the Scorpio and the 833 is that the 888 and Scorpio also have Dante I/O. The 833 doesn't. So if you ever see Dante being a part of your production future and jobs that you're going to take on, if you think Dante is going to be involved, really consider the 888 or Scorpio there. So that's a very brief overview of what the models are. Now, you should consider the 833, the 888, and the Scorpio as really the heart of a whole ecosystem. Their functionality can be expanded by adding a whole range of extra accessories and controllers. For instance, we have a whole integrated wireless range of accessories here. We have the SL6, which already existed for the 688 in the 6 series range of recorders, our previous range of mixer recorders. That is also compatible with a Scorpio, and that brings 6 channels of wireless integration to the Scorpio. We have also, in the last few months, released the SL2, which I'll talk about more today. And that is compatible with all 3 models of the 8 series. And it brings up to 8 channels of integrated wireless power distribution, control, RF distribution to the 8 series. And that basically fits very securely and robustly to the top of each of the 3 units, such that it feels like it's actually built-in part of the actual system. The nice thing about the SL2 is it's completely receiver agnostic. You can use whichever manufacturer's receivers you want, whether it's Electrosonics, Wizicom, our own audio limited sound devices, 8Ns, Sennheiser, and even up and coming the Sonys as well. So yeah, more about that soon. Now, in terms of controllers, yeah, I mean, we have so many ways you can set up to control your 8 series. Obviously, you can do it all from the front panel, and you can dive into menus, and you've got shortcuts even on the front panel to access virtually any function. You can map shortcuts to many different features. So you can control the whole thing, all the functions directly from the front panel. But if you're on a cart, you'd probably want to work from a controller. And we have obviously our own bespoke CL16, 16 fader, PNG fader controller, which really brings all the functionality of the 8 series to the surface. And that's currently compatible with the Scorpio and the 888. Not currently the 833. You might get some functionality, but it's not officially approved, the 833 as yet. We also support a whole range of third-party controllers as well, such as X-Touch by Behringer, the X-Touch Expander. We support the Sonosax LC8, which is a very compact linear fader controller. We support Icon platform, M Plus and X Plus. So there's a whole range of controllers there. And on top of that, you can control the system from an app too, which we call SD Remote. And that's available for Android and iPad. And I'm going to talk about that quite a lot today, because in the recent version 7 firmware we released about a week or so ago, we added quite a lot of functionality there. So a lot of control, and that's even before we've spoken about USB keyboard control. And with version 7, we made it such that you can pretty much access and control any parameter with the 8 series from a keyboard. We've really opened that up in the recent version of firmware. And if you're already familiar with the 8 series, I really highly recommend looking into that. It starts to give you some really useful control. Now, when I talk about USB keyboards, let's not just think about the traditional wireless keyboard. Let's also think about wireless keyboards like this Bluetooth keyboard. You can use these. You can also use things like X keys and other USB keyboard emulators. And here's like one over here. So something like this. And these types of devices, this one's made by X Keys, as I said, you can program these buttons to emulate any keyboard command. So you pretty much can have full control from here too. You can even program macros on a single button press. And a macro is essentially multiple commands which are acted out upon that button press. So you can do all sorts of clever things. And they're very easy to program. You don't need to be a programmer to be able to set them up the way you want them to. And not only that, there's other devices as well out there like this. I love this device. This is my favorite product of the year. It's called Input Stick. And you just plug that into the USB-A port on your A series. and then that gives you wireless USB control, keyboard control from your iPhone or your Android phone or whatever. And again, you can program virtually any function you want all from this. So pretty nice tool. Okay, so that's a brief overview. I thought that the best way to approach this is to go through sort of like a typical day, and in terms of setting up the product. And then that should hopefully sort of bring questions to the surface on what you want answered. So, however, before I do, I'm primarily going to be focusing on the Scorpio because all the functions in Scorpio also pretty much apply to the 833 and the 888 as well. So it's just imagine that it's with fewer inputs and outputs. That's the only difference. And obviously lack of Dante on the 833. So let's talk about setting up. And I'm going to switch my camera for a bit because I want to show you my setup very briefly anyway. So I'm going to switch camera. Hopefully you'll get to see this clearly. All right. Joe, is that coming out okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. So you've got this setup here. I have obviously a Scorpio sitting in the middle here, and this is currently connected to my CL16 controller. And I've got an 888 on top there as well, which is actually feeding some Dante down to my Scorpio. And I've got an SL6 wireless module here. I haven't got any receivers in there right now, but that's what that is. If you're wondering what that is, you slot in super slot receivers into here. And over here, I have an 833 with an SL2 on top. So I've got a pretty capable system right here. Overkill, but I'm into technology. So, and then here you can see SD Remote app running on an Android, and there's one running down here as well. So, and there's a Sonosax controller over there. So let's do a typical setup here. I want to talk you through, the first thing you might do on a day is format your cards. You want to start afresh. Now, the 8 series, you can record to your record media. There's an internal 256 gig SSD on each model. And then you can simultaneously write to 2 SD cards as well, which are behind this little flap here. Okay. And you can record all tracks to all 3 media simultaneously, or you can actually choose which tracks go to which media and in which format you want to send to each media. So the first thing you'd pretty much do on a day, and I'm going to zoom in here to the 8 series screen so you can see what I'm doing a bit clearer. Okay. So I'm going to be controlling this all from my CL16. So yeah, you might want to come in here, go to your files menu, and you just press the menu to get to this main menu screen. Go into the files menu, and then you can see very much here, erase, format, what have you. Okay, so I can come in here, I can format my SD card. I'm not going to do that right now, but I can give the SD cards their own volume name as well, which can be useful descriptive information if you're sending this card to post. All right, so that's what you do there. Now, in this menu, you can also access the take list. And this is going to be a chronological list with the most recent take at the top of all your recordings. The take at the very top is actually the next take to be recorded. So it's a future take. And this is where you can actually also set up where you want all your recordings to be stored? In what record folder do you want to store your recordings? Now, this is very important. Now, we do things differently compared to the 6 series, where you had this menu which had 3-level folder architecture. And I want to go over this because there has been a bit of confusion regarding this new record folder mechanism that we have, an architecture we have. It's essentially still 3 levels of folders, but you have a lot more flexibility on where you can put your daily folders or your project folders or custom folders. With the 6 series, you were pretty much fixed at always putting your daily folder at a particular level. You couldn't put a daily folder within a custom folder, or you couldn't have, it was just less flexible. So this gives you more opportunity. So the way to do that is, because we're thinking about our next recordings, you go to the next take in your take list to configure your record folder. And to do that, you'd hit edit here. And then you can see at the bottom of the screen here, record folder. So I can do that. And now you've essentially got like a navigator for setting up your record folder. It's almost like Windows Explorer or Mac Finder, but for the 8 series. Now here, I haven't created a folder right now. If I don't create a new folder, it's essentially going to record all your takes at the root level of all 3 media, okay? But let's do something here. Let's try a setup here. So I've selected new folder, and I'm going to, let's create a custom folder here. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. Custom and project are quite similar. The only difference is that when you select project, it's actually going to take the name that you've added in your project metadata here, okay, for the next take. So just going back up a level, I select my next take, and now I want to edit the various metadata for that. So I can come in here, and in this case, the project is called Scorpio. Okay, so let's use that. So select record folder, and I'm going to select new folder, and now I'm going to select project. Now within that, and let's say Scorpio is the name of the actual show. Let's now, I want to go into that folder and store a folder within it to define an episode or a series folder. Okay, well, let's call it an episode. So I'm going to come in here, and to enter that Scorpio folder, I have to press the headphone encoder here. So I go into it. Now I'm inside that folder. I can go back up a level and by pressing menu, but to go into a folder, I press headphone encoder. Now you can see there's no folders in there. So I'm going to create another folder in there. And then I'm going to create, just in this example, maybe a custom folder. And I'm going to call that episode 1. For instance. Okay, there you go. So now I'm in there, and it tells me that it's the current folder. That's the one that I've currently selected, and that's going to be where I'm storing all my recordings. I can go back up a level and see that it's inside my Scorpio folder. And there's my episode 1. I could actually create another folder here if I wanted to. Let's do that. Custom. I'm going to call this one episode 2. All right, okay, boom. So now I can scroll between each of these folders, and then if I want to switch between folders for recording, because currently EP2 is set, but I want to go back to EP1, I select it and then hit set folder. Right now, EP1 has become my current folder. Now this makes it very easy to switch between projects, especially if you're doing multiple projects at the same time, and some users do. It might be on a commercial one day and an episodic the next, or a live event the next. So you can very quickly switch between projects here. So now I've selected EP1, and just to show you here, I'm going to go enter now my episode 1. Come in here, and you can see I've got no folders within episode 1. I could just choose to record my files directly into episode 1 with no further folders. That'd be fine. That's no problem. But I actually want to create a third level here. So I'm going to create a new folder. And this I'm going to choose daily. It could be custom if you wanted. It doesn't have to be, but typically, I'm going to set up a daily folder for that. And a daily folder, I think you all know what that is. That will essentially create a new folder each time you go past midnight. Now, in the current version 7 firmware, it automatically does that as you go past midnight. We obviously totally realize that when you're working late and across midnight, you sometimes, and more often than not, actually don't want a new folder to be created. You want to store your takes in the previous day's folder because it's essentially the same shoot day. Well, you'll be pleased to hear, and I don't normally talk about future features, but we are going to be supporting that in the very near future. So look out for that. Okay. So I've just created a daily folder here, and it's probably very difficult for you to see, but it's highlighted in the color orange, and that means it's the current folder. And I don't think you can see that very well here, but if you look on the screen, one of these EP2 is white and EP1 is orange. You always know your current record path by following the orange text. All right, so I know that I'm not in a folder within EP2 because EP1 is white. So always follow the orange, and EP1 is currently orange. So I know that's where my current folder is within that folder. And I've set it to daily. So this is just one example, but there's a lot more flexibility with record folders on the 8 series than there are on the 6. I know it's new and it might be confusing if you've come from the 6 series, but it's worth familiarizing yourself with. And once you do, it becomes pretty straightforward. So now I'm going to go back up the tree, and I'm there. I've now set up my record folder to be a daily folder with an EP1. I might want to come here and I might want to add a scene name, and off I go. All right, so there's a bit of initial setup for you. We've formatted the cards, we've created our record folder, and now we're essentially ready to go, except we haven't done any routing yet. So I think this is the next thing to do. Let's take a look how you set up your input routing. And then I'm going to, after talking about input routing, I'm going to be talking about buses and output routing, because this is what sets the 8 series far apart from any other portable audio recording system on the market. The flexibility of not just the input to channel routing, but also the bus and output routing. So again, I'm going to switch back to the channel screen. I'm not going to focus primarily on the CL16 interface for setting this up right now, but I do want to say that all this routing capability is made far more accessible and easier to do from the CL16 controller. You can dive in much quicker and access a lot of these routing points very simply. I will show that briefly a bit later. So switching the camera again, and here we go. So I'm going to set up channel 1. I'm just going to zoom in here a bit closer so you can see what's going on. Right. So, by the way, feel free to ask questions if this is all obvious stuff to you. So, to access any channel screen, you flick a PFL switch. All right. That's from the front panel. I can access it from the CL16, any controller, from a USB keyboard as well, but I'm showing you how to do it from here. And I can do it from SD remote. I come here. If I flick the switch to PFL 1, it brings me to the channel 1 PFL screen just here. All right. And obviously on the Scorpio, I have 32 of these. It might be worth pointing out that obviously on the front panel of Scorpio, we only have 12 toggle switch positions. So you might ask, well, how the hell do I get to channels 13 through 32? Well, this is where these star toggles come in, okay? So if I hold a star and move a toggle switch at the same time, it's going to bring me up the higher channel. So star 1 plus PFL 1 at the same time is going to actually bring up channel 13. Star plus PFL 2 is going to be channel 14 and so forth, going all the way up to channels 24. And then if you want to access channels 25 through 32, you use the star 2 position here. Hold that and then move your PFL 1 toggle over here, and that'll get you to channel 25. All right. Obviously, that's going to be a whole damn sight easier from the CL16 because you've got many more toggle switches there. All right. I'll try not to move the camera around too much because it's probably making you feel a bit seasick. Anyway, here we go. Channel screen. At the very top of the channel screen, we have its name that you've entered, and that name can be entered from any controller, from the SD remote app, from the front panel. Here's a useful shortcut. If you don't know this one already, if you're a 6 series user, you probably know this, but if you're in channel 1 screen and you hold channel 1 PFL for a second, it will bring up a shortcut to editing that name, okay? So let me just enter a name here, like, boom. I'm actually entering this from the CL16 because it's easier, okay? And just to show you that again, we've got a pretty nice virtual keyboard here. And all of this functionality can be accessed from a USB keyboard. One of these, CL16, you don't need to navigate, scroll around and what have you. But if you have to, then you still can do it. And it's pretty quick. All right. All right. So we've called that boom. And notice if I've called that boom on all controllers and SD remote, they're all going to be synchronized. So it comes up here as well. It will show up everywhere. If I show you on my SD remote here, let's come up to boom here. So whenever you do any metadata entry from any controller, it's always keeping all devices in sync. All right. Okay, so that's the first thing you do. You've got signal level here. Then you're going to set up your input. So this is where you set up your input source, just here. Okay. Let's move this across a bit here. All right. Now, the routing capability of the 8 series is just second to none. You can, in essence, select any physical input to any channel. And on the Scorpio, you've got 16 mic line inputs. You've got wireless sources, whether it be SL6 or an SL2. Currently, we're not showing an SL2 because I don't have one connected. But if an SL2 was connected, you'd see that here too. You've got your Dante sources, all right? And it's currently telling me that channel 1 Dante is selected. If I select that, it disables it. But if I want to change the source for Dante, I can then flick this switch. And then it shows me all the 32 Dante channels. Now, also on the 888, there's only 16 Dante, and on the 833, there's none. Okay, so that's my Dante. This anyone who hasn't downloaded version 7 firmware will probably notice that that's different from the way it was. Version 7 has introduced the ability to route any of the 32 Dante channels to any of the channels 1 through 32. It was previously only 1 through 16 to channels 1 through 16, and Dante channels 17 through 32 to channels 17 through 32. So this allows a lot more routing flexibility. You've also got the ability to route your AES sources, USB sources. haven't mentioned this yet, but the 8 series is also a great USB audio interface, which makes it great, especially if you're bringing in say a remote contributor over over IP. You can do that, or you might want to send a feed to a remote contributor. You could do that via USB, connect it up to a computer or a phone, and send that signal over the internet. So that's pretty useful. Then you have this thing called XLAES, which is currently not selectable because I don't have one connected. And just to let you know what the XLAES is, it's this. It's a little module which brings an additional 8 AES inputs to any of the 3 models, okay? And you've got 2 channels of digital per TA3 connector there. That very simply connects to the 8 series by plugging into the top unit expansion port, which is underneath the little cover on top of the 8 series. So that's what that's for, the XLAES. And then you can see some extra returns there. So there's a lot of routing capability. And I mean, if you add them all up, you've probably got 80 or 90 different physical inputs and on Scorpio. And you can route any of those in any combination to any channel. In fact, you can take any of these sources and route them to multiple channels. If I wanted, I could take mic 1 and route it to channels 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as I want, and record those all at different level with different trim gain settings, different processing, EQ, noise assist, compression, what have you. So that opens up some very interesting possibilities. All right. So this is, I'm going to currently leave Dante there. Notice if I come up here and actually select a mic input, it brings up the ability to select phantom or mic or line on this switch. All right. So it's intelligent. It switches the options on the toggle switches below the LCD, depending on what the source type is. All right. Actually, if I come up here, you can see when I select a wireless input, in this case, SL6A2, okay, decline. Hopefully, someone just interrupted me. Are you still with me, everybody?
Yep, looks good. Video's back. Someone
Okay.
call you.
Yeah. God, I'm so popular. Anyway, so that's channel screen, everybody. And we're going to now just take that back to Dante. Okay, for now. All right, so let's come back out of that and go to our channel screen. And very quickly, I do want to show this. I can access that Dante routing, that routing screen. And I'm going to show you this on the CL16 because I think it's worth doing. So I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. All right. I can access the channel screen, bring up that whole channel setup by moving this switch here, the toggle switch right here for channel 1. And now you can see on the top row, I have the ability to name a track, select the source, in which case it's Dante 1, right here. And, you know, to access that, all of these encoders along the top here, these correspond to these 2 top rows of information. So it tells me here that on the second knob along, I can select my source. So I'm going to do that. And now I've done that, I can then come in here and route from there. But more on that later. Okay, let's go back into the channel 1 screen, see what else we can do here, because I do want to talk about some of the other really nice things you can do with your channels. Zoom in a bit closer. Okay, the next row down here is basically just configuring neighboring channel pairs as either stereo or MS linked. I think anyone who's familiar with our 6 series or 7 series will also know what that's all about. Don't think I need to go into too much detail there, but essentially that pairs an odd a neighboring odd and even channel. So 1 and 2 in this case. And basically what it does is it gives you the gain control on pot 1 and trim control on trim 1 and so forth. All right. Coming out of that. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's stay there. Okay, the next row down is our high pass filter select. So you can just come in here, enable that. So when you enable it, the text goes white instead of gray. And I can come in there and select anything from 40 to 320. All right. So that's that. Then coming down, we've got phase invert on each channel, all 32 channels on the Scorpio. We have input delay, 0 to 50 milliseconds in 0.1 millisecond steps. So that's useful for compensating for delay due to wireless. And then we've got a limiter enable here. Now, limiter settings are set in a separate menu. Very quickly going to come to that here. And whoops. So if I come to my main menu and go to limiters, and actually anyone who hasn't downloaded version 7 or has just downloaded version 7 will notice we've added more control over your limiter parameters. We've added knee and attack time. We already had ratio and threshold for your limiters, but now you can also see here knee and attack time, so you can fine tune the effect of your limiters. Now, these are global settings, okay? So whatever you set here is going to apply to all channels. You can still turn the channel limiter on and off individually for each channel, but whichever channel is enabled, it's going to use these parameters. You do have separate control over the bus limiters, because we have limiters on buses as well, and they have knee, attack time, release, and ratio and threshold too, and they can be set differently from your channel limiters. So you do have some independent control there too. But let's go back to my channel screen here. Now, this is new. Comp, short for compression. In version 7 firmware, this is a big deal. We added compression. You can apply compression now to 32 channels individually. And unlike the limiters, you can have totally different parameter settings for each channel. So you can optimize each channel to the signal coming in. So in this case, compression is off on channel 1. I can now press that, and now you get to see the new channel screen. This will be new to a lot of people. So you get to see the compression curve here, and you still get to see your input metering. And to the left of the curve, the graph here, you get a compression attenuation meter. Now at the moment, compression is off. So let's turn it on. I'm actually controlling this from my CL16 right now, but obviously I can control it from these toggle switches here, but I'm doing it all from the CL16. So you can set your compressor on each channel to be applied pre-fade or post-fade. If you apply it pre-fade, obviously it's going to affect the ISO. If you want to keep your channels clean, you know, some post houses don't like you to provide process signal, then don't apply it pre. But if you're doing, you know, especially like a live event or there's no time for post, then applying compression to the pre-fade signal is fine. And why would you use compression? Well, I think everyone knows what a compressor does. It sort of like reduces a very wide dynamic range signal and sort of compresses it so that it's not such wide dynamic range, which can be useful, especially in a scenario where you have speakers who their voice is sort of like varying in level quite a bit. And especially if it's a bit more of a noisy background, you want to set their voice to be a bit more of a consistent level. You can apply compression to help that voice cut through at all times. So let's see what parameters you have here. On that second toggle position, I have threshold control. And that adjusts at what point the compression is going to cut in. I'm not going to give you a tutorial on what a compressor is. I think everyone knows what a compressor is, but you can see you've got a good range there, all the way from 0 to -40. As a good starting point, I would leave it at -20, because that's where, you know, we're sort of typically setting the average dialogue level. All right, but you can tweak it from there. The next toggle is your ratio control. And again, a good starting point is 2:1. And that means everything above the threshold point is going to be compressed at a ratio of 2:1. And you can see that in the shape of that curve. If I increase that, you can see it's starting to apply a steeper compression. I mean, if you keep tweaking that up and up, it's actually starting to more look like a limiter, where it's like a brick wall limiter. All right. So you could actually use this as a limiter, but there's really no point because you already have limiter control. Having said that, if you previously, I did say to you that the limiter settings were global on the channels. You don't have individual control per channel. If you needed to run independent limiter parameters for each channel, you could use the compressor for this purpose. All right. So that's your ratio. I typically will sit it somewhere around 2 to 4 for dialogue. Okay, but it depends on so many things: the type of voice, the surroundings, the microphone. You have to play with this. Then you get to choose whether you want a hard knee or a soft knee, and all that means is the point. If it's soft knee, it means that it's more of a gradual transition to the compression point across the threshold. So it's a little bit of a softer. If it's set to soft, then it's going to be slightly less harsh. It's a subtle difference. Hard, it's going to really start compressing immediately as soon as it cuts across that threshold with the full ratio. With soft, it's going to be a gradual transition across that threshold point. And then you have attack and release, and 10 milliseconds and 100 milliseconds are good starting points for that. Depending, if you've got very, very transient material, you might want to reduce your attack time a little bit more. But for dialogue, 10 milliseconds is pretty good, as is a release time of 100 milliseconds. So one thing I didn't mention, and actually, let's just see the meter in action. So if I lower the threshold here, you should see the amount of attenuation increase because the compressor is cutting in at a lower level. Okay, so there you go. All right. Okay, the other thing I didn't mention is you can apply the compressor after fader. So that means if you want to keep your ISOs clean, select post here, and it will feed each channel into the mix post the compressor without affecting the ISOs. Compression, great new feature. And as I said, it applies across all channels, even channel 32. We do have compression as well on all the buses, which is also a very powerful tool. You could apply a bit of compression to your IFB feeds or to a PA feed, or a whole range of different applications there. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So there's compression. Let's come up here to ISO. You can set the channel to be routed to the actual ISO track pre or post fade. Why would you do that? These sort of, most times you're routing pre-fade because you don't want them to be, you want them to not be affected by the mix. But some cases, if you're not interested in actually providing a mixed track, you might want the ISO levels to be dependent on your faders, and because you've got more actual physical control there, with a linear fader. But typically it's set to pre. We do have EQ on the first 16 channels. And here you've got 3-band EQ, low band, mid band, and high band. Again, you get to see the you get to see the curve here. I can control this all from my CL60. So I'm going to turn that on. I can apply it pre or post fade again and do for the same reasons as you did with compression. I can choose a channel, whether I'm working with low frequency, mid frequency, or high frequency using the middle toggle here. And then I can bypass bands just by toggling the tone toggle just there. All right. In this case, I'm going to just show you what the curve looks like. Now, to boost boost a particular band, you use the headphone encoder here. So I need to bypass it first. So now you can see that I'm adjusting the curve. That's the gain, and this pot here is my frequency. And then I can adjust the Q down here, which is the bandwidth of that peak. Okay, so now I can make it more peaky if I want to notch out a specific frequency or make it more of a gradual transition. And on the low bands and the high frequency bands, you also have a shelf filter, not just a band pass filter. Okay, so that's EQ. All of this can be controlled from the CL16 as well. In fact, you've got even more dedicated control there. I'll just very quickly show you this. If I come in here, and there's multiple ways of doing this, but let's just look at the fat channel way here. Now, a fat channel is basically just another name for channel screen. It's a term that's used on digital consoles quite commonly to refer to channel setup parameters, and we've got access to those here. So if I go to channel, my channel screen here, you can see I've got all the parameters for channel 1 lined up across all of these pot controls here. Okay, and you can see that some of them are dedicated to frequency, or low band, mid band, and high band. All right, and I can adjust things like my gain on this pot here, my frequency, my Q, the shelf type, what have you. All right, so I can do all of that very neatly from the CL16. There's actually another way to do that as well from the CL16, and that is by entering EQ modes. For instance, I can press these two buttons to enter my low frequency mode. And now the top two rows of encoder knobs here are adjusting the frequency and the gain for each of the 16 channels. So this becomes more like a traditional analog console at this point, where you have a fader, a trim control, and then your EQ controls on here per channel strip. Okay, so there's multiple ways to configure that. Going back to channel 1 here, let's just come back in. Covering a lot of ground here on the channel screen. So the next thing on the channel screen is where you can enable auto mix. Now, as you know, our 8 series have two options, have built-in auto mixing capability, and you've got two options: either Dugan auto mixing, the widely loved industry standard auto mixing algorithm, and we also have our also very well liked mix assist algorithm. Now, this is where you choose to actually enable or disable a channel. Currently, I've got it disabled, so I'm going to go into my menu, and it's taken me on a shortcut directly to the auto mixer setup here. Okay, so here you get to choose what algorithm you want to use, Dugan or Mix Assist. Let's leave it on Dugan. You then can choose to enable it right there. I can actually put a shortcut to enabling or disabling the Mix Assist on many of these toggle switches, and I like to do that because when I'm auto mixing, I like to very quickly enable and disable the auto mixer to hear the effects of it on and off, And to have that on-off control on a dedicated toggle switch is a very quick way to do that comparison without having to dive into a menu. Okay, so you can then choose which of the 16 channels are going to be routed to that auto mixer. So I've got them all set there right now. And if I come back to my screen here, I can see that I can come in here and very quickly disable that if I want to drop it out of the auto mix. It's worth noting here that when it's on, you get to see a Dugan meter showing you how open the channel is. The higher the signal, the more open that microphone is in the mix. So the other nice thing to note there is because you can either do a stereo auto mix, or you can have two independent mono auto mixes. And to achieve that, you route via your pan control here. So currently this channel is going to both of the auto mix groups. If I pan that fully left, you may, if you keep an eye on this meter up here, you'll see it sort of go up to the left of the meter or the top of the meter. If I move it center, it goes to the middle, and if I go to the right, it goes to the bottom. But I can have two different auto mixes running, have maybe a group of channels, say 1 through 6, all going to the left bus, and in which case they're going to be treated independently from any other channels going to the right bus. So you can have two separate mix groups there. Okay. And talk more about that pan control in a second. So that's auto mix for you. As I said, the first 16 channels on both the 888 and the Scorpio. Obviously on the 833, it's 8 channels only. Next along, we have noise assist. So let's talk about that right now. Noise assist we introduced to the industry to much surprise and fanfare. People weren't expecting us to introduce this capability. We've been working on it for several years behind the scenes. And because we just absolutely knew that it would be a great tool and problem solver in many situations, to have that ability to suppress noise on a channel on set or on location would be very useful. We knew that there were many users out there who are using external hardware noise suppression tools like the Cedar, you know, and they were making it work. A great product, but the convenience of having this all built inside the recorder itself is like, it's very, very convenient. No external cabling, no external powering, no extra hardware to bolt on, much more portable. It's now all inside. So here we've got this dedicated noise suppression menu. And this is our own algorithm. As I said, it took a few years to develop this, for us to fine tune it and get it right. But the feedback that we've received from end users on this has been very, very positive, and we're very glad about that. So, you know, just to let you know, I think you all know it's really designed to work on slow changing background noises. It's not designed to cut out things like dog barking or sudden people screaming or anything like that. It's for very consistent background noise like air conditioning, reverb. Someone mentions computer fan noise. It's great on that. A reverberant space, you can help to reduce and get rid of some of that reverb very effectively. It's good with distant traffic noise, generator noise. Yeah, it's very good. And yeah, you would use it primarily in very fast turnaround productions, or you know, if you're going via post, they've got the time to use something like isotope or something like that to clean up noise. But if you're live to air, podcasting or what have you, doing anything like this, or a very quick turnaround production, and you don't have time for that, Noise Assist can really help. You can, so let's talk about this in a little bit more detail here. The Noise Assist algorithm, you simply enable here just by coming into this menu, and then you can choose which of 16 channels or the left-right bus you want to have it applied to. You can only have 2 instances at a time. So what does that mean? It means I could have, say, 2 different channels selected, or I could have a channel and maybe a bus, or maybe I could have 2 buses. But I can't have more than 2 instances. I can't have noises applied to all 16 channels at the same time. All right. So in this case, I'm just going to apply it to, say, channel 1, and then I'm going to apply it to my, say, right bus. Yeah, so maybe if I'm delivering a mono mix, I would keep my left bus clean, and I'd maybe have a noise assisted version of that on my R bus. That's just one example of possible routing. I'm just going to come into my channel screen again now. And now that I've enabled noise assist down here, it's now accessible. And now I can dial in an amount of attenuation. So 0 means unprocessed. There's no noise assist applied. And then as I adjust, I can adjust more and more attenuation. It seems that many people are very happy with around 3 to 4 dBs of attenuation. That's like a good balance where it reduces the background noise enough to make the dialogue intelligible. But you really have to experiment with this. It's going to vary on the environment. But you do have the ability to go all the way down to 20 dBs of attenuation. So if you're in a really high background noise environment, you can bring that right down. And it's not going to, I mean, the algorithm's designed to bring down the background noise without affecting the dialogue at all. So it's way more advanced than a simple gate. Now, obviously, like any form of processing, if you apply it super aggressively, then you are going to start to hear potential artifacts on the actual dialogue. So you want to set it sort of at that sweet spot, which reduces the background noise enough to make the dialogue nice and intelligible, and not have the background noise be disruptive and annoying for the listener, but then to maintain as much of the dialogue quality as possible. I typically work in a range of, say, -3 to sort of like -8 or -9. I find that caters to 99% of scenarios. As I said, most of the users that I've spoken to typically work with -3 or 4, and that works for them. Okay, so that's Automix. Now, we've spoken about a lot of different processing going on here. We've got the limiters, we've got the high pass filters, we've got the delay, we've got the phase, we've got the 3-band EQ, we've got Dugan and Mix Assist auto mix algorithms, and we've got noise assist too. We've had a few questions from people saying, "Oh, what are the limitations? If can I run all of those at the same time on a channel?" Yes, you can. This is one of the absolutely sweet things about the 8 series. That it's such a powerful system. It can run all of these processes simultaneously. So yeah, you don't need to worry about that. Here we have the ability to route this particular channel to any of the buses. Here, I'm going to talk more about that in a minute as we get onto bus routing. Whoops, come back into here. And then while we're in the channel screen, you'll notice that I can still adjust the headphone volume here using the headphone pot right here. All right. Now, here's a little trick. When you're in the an important trick, a very important trick. When you're in the channel screen, it's automatically soloing that channel. In fact, let me just come out of here and bring that back to here. Oops, I'm going to turn that off here. All right. Where are we? Left, right stereo. So typically you're listening to the mix here on your headphones. When I go into a channel screen, it automatically PFLs it. So I'm listening to that channel, which is, often what you want to do. But sometimes you still want to be able to, as you're adjusting channel parameters, you still want to be able to hear the mix. So, and that's particularly important is if you're adjusting your pan, you want to be able to hear the effect of the pan, which I'm doing now. I'm switching it between left, center, right. Oh, and by the way, we do have continuous pan control as well, if you want that. And the trick there is to hold the toggle and then rotate the encoder backwards and forwards. All right. That's the way to do it from the front panel control. All right. So, but how do you hear the effect of that if you're in a channel screen and making that adjustment? Well, if you press the headphone knob, it will toggle between the PFL and whatever your current headphone preset is at that time. In my case, left, right stereo. So it's a very quick way to hear the effect of your adjustments in the mix. Okay, a few other things while we're on this screen. You can mute a channel very quickly. I can do this from all the control as well. An improvement over the 6 series is now virtually in any menu screen, you can still activate slate without having to jump out of the menu back to the home screen and activating slate, because you need to dive for that switch sometimes. Okay, and then you have an arm control in this screen as well. All right. Okay, so that's the channel screen. I'm just wondering if there's any questions on that right now, Joe.
Lots of questions.
Okay.
With the stuff that we've covered so far. I know some of you have sent questions in about other things. We'll touch on those when we get to a couple questions on controllers, a couple questions on the SL2. I'm just going to leave those open and we'll answer those when we get to those sessions. So if we didn't answer your question in this round, don't worry about it. We'll get there. First one from Dustin Harmon asking, with Dante, does that simply replace the onboard preamps or can you use them in conjunction?
You can use them in conjunction, absolutely. So you could run 16 channels of Dante and 16 mic preamps as well. As I said, the flexibility of the actual physical input types to channels is like a digital patch bay. You're not replacing one with another. You always have access to every physical input type, regardless of whether you're using Dante or USB or what have you.
Mm-hmm. There's a second part of that question. If I so with the 888, there's 16 recordable tracks. If I plug in an 8-channel preamp, a Dante 8-channel preamp, can you record 24 tracks? No. So you're still limited to those 16 tracks on the 888.
Correct.
So we got you there. Question from
on that question, Joe, there's just a little addendum to that.
Yeah.
In general, yes, it's 16 channels tracks on the 888 and 8 channels tracks on the 833. You can, there's a couple of recordable bus tracks, which we refer to as B1, B2. And with a little bit of clever routing, you can route inputs to those buses, additional inputs to those buses to give you a couple of extra ISOs if you want. It's a little bit of a hack, but I know people who have actually done that and done it very effectively.
Question from Ken Goodwin. This is actually a really good one. Is the HPF the same as the LF EQ band? No,
absolutely not. So the high pass filter is much earlier on in your signal path, and it's much near the front end of the signal path. So it will cut out any low frequencies before sort of hitting the digital world. Well, there's a bit of magic going on, which I'm not willing to sort of go into because it's giving away some of our magic sauce. But you can actually have a physical input, like say mic 1, going off to multiple, being routed to multiple channels, and have a different high pass filter and trim gain for that mic on those separate channels. But it is totally different. The low frequency band is additional to that and can be used as such.
And that does show on the channel EQ as well. So while you're looking at that EQ view, you will see your low cut filter when that's engaged.
Yeah. Probably just demonstrate that now. Let's come in here. I think that's the case. And then come into my EQ here. And I don't know if it does actually, Joe. Don't know if it does show. No, it doesn't show the.
Even if it's not active. Okay, never mind then. My mistake.
Any other questions?
Yeah, a few more here. And the 888, if I'm using the 8 physical inputs, can we use the XL AES for the remaining 8 channels?
Yes.
Okay.
As I said, there's no limit at all to how and what combination of inputs, physical, where you route them. It's totally flexible. There's no restriction.
Tyler Moore had a question. How do you get into EQ from the bus? The EQ is channel specific, I believe, right, Paul? Not on the buses?
Yes, we don't have EQ on the buses. We have compression and limiters and noise assist, but not EQ.
Question
maybe that's something we'll consider for the future.
Yeah, if it's useful, you guys can. And again, one thing I want to mention here: a lot of the things we have coming through are feature requests. If you guys have feature requests, we'd love to talk about them. You can always reach out to support. Our support team, that's support@sounddevices.com. You can drop them an email. That way, it gets discussed and reviewed by the people who implement features, like Paul. That's a great way. We do see the ones on social media. Sometimes that gets a little hard to keep up with. So if you have a really strong feature, that you want implemented, you can always contact our support team because we're always looking for feedback. So yeah, if you guys have feature requests in here, we might not get to them. We might not call them out. That's totally fine if something is a dedicated feature request. Question about the auto mixers with the panning. Mm-hmm. So if you're using an auto mixer with 2 booms panned left and a bunch of lavs panned right, and you have them both set to an auto mix, will it mix the booms and lavs separately?
If you've panned, yes, because you have it panned left and right, so they're not all going to be mixed together. Mm-hmm. They're independent at that point.
So you're creating essentially 2 auto mix groups between those two.
Two mono mixes as opposed to one stereo mix. Yeah.
Okay. Ben, noise assist on a bus. No, noise assist can go on an individual channel or bus L or bus R, and you can run 2 instances of noise assist on your 8 series.
So we have had the request from a few people. Can we have noise assist applied to B1 and B2? You can't, but there is. It's something we'll take note of, but certainly no promises there. There is a little way, an easy way around that, especially on a high channel, on the 888 and the Scorpio, where you've got far more inputs and outputs spare. You could essentially route your clean left or right mix out of one of the outputs and connect it to one of the spare inputs. Like on Scorpio, you've got 16 of them, so you could easily route it to a spare input. And I'll just, for instance, take because we've got so many outputs like X9 and X10, which is on a 3.5mm unbalanced connector, have a little cable, just connecting that round to one of the spare inputs, and then apply the noise assist to those channels. That's one way of doing it. So, and I know users have done that too. One external cable is all you need.
Yeah. Question from Andy Turret. With the 6 series, it was recommended to do a factory default after doing a firmware upgrade and reset your menu settings. Is that necessary with the 8 series?
It's not mandatory. But I just think in general, that's good practice with any bit of software. Whenever I update anything, Pro Tools, Adobe Audition, whatever products I always reload things. But you don't have to. I would recommend it, especially if it's a major update. Like for instance, version 7 added a huge range of functionality, and there's some changes to routing capability and all that sort of thing. Now, yeah, it's probably going to be fine, but just bear in mind there's literally 10,000,001 different permutations of a user setup prior to updating firmware. It's impossible for Sound Devices engineering to test every one of those setups prior to upgrading to check that those setups are unaffected. So, I mean, we do a huge amount of testing on updating from previous versions to later versions with various different setups to prove that there aren't any problems, but it's impossible for us to test every one. So I recommend updating firmware when you've got a bit of time, not right in the middle of production or recording. Do it on a weekend or at the end of the day and rebuild your setup if you can.
Question from Linus, and I actually know I have our official answer on this one. In the manual about limiters, it says analog first stage, all subsequent stages digital. Can you explain what that means? Every input has an analog limiter in the first stage, and the first stage refers to the limiting happening before the A to D converter. So that's our official answer on that without giving out too much info. From Andy Turret, can you mute the slate switch?
Can you mute? You mean disable it so it doesn't function? Is that?
Yeah, I think that might be the question. And it's only you have the option of latch with your slate, Andy, if that's what you mean. The slate switch will only turn on when you turn it on, and you do have a latching option for that.
I'd like to know a bit more about that question.
Sure. Yeah, Andy, if you have.
If it's saying mute, does he want it disabled so he doesn't accidentally operate it?
Is that what you mean?
Question?
You can let us know. You can type it out there. Yeah, as much detail as you guys can send in for these questions, especially when they get asked multiple questions later, it's can be hard for us to tell exactly what you guys mean since it's such a can be a little complicated.
I mean, just I can answer that now, but basically, yes, you can disable the slate from functioning. You can map all of these toggle switches underneath the LCD to different functions and disable them. You can do that from there's a menu called the toggle switch action menu in the system menu, which gives you that ability to customize what these switches do.
Okay. Tom Crockett, hey Tom, said to Andy, I changed my slate mic switch to be COM2, so if I accidentally hit it in the PFL screen, it won't go to the track. So there's a good trick from Tom.
Right, and obviously you can disable the slate routing in the slate routing menu as well. So if you don't want it to go off to certain tracks or outputs, you can do that.
A question from Ben Lazard. In a channel screen or a menu screen, can I use the COM button, COM1 and COM2?
That's a good question. Certainly you can do it from a CL16 controllers. From the if you're talking about from the front panel, I think you can, yes. So if you look at many of our menus, for instance, I'll go to bus menu, for instance, here. You can, I'm just going to switch my screen so you can see what I'm doing.
Thank you.
Okay. So like I've just gone into the bus screen here, bus 1 routing screen, and you can still see this slate mic icon here, which you can deactivate and activate. Now the question is, does that, if I come here, it's ComSend 1 here right now. If I hold the select encoder and move that slate switch, that's the default routing. I can change the way this works. I think you can. So if I just come out of that and disable that, and then go into a bus menu here, and do that from here, Yes, it does. It actually shows me, I don't know if you can see that here, it says com send one. So yes, is the answer to your question.
Perfect. And he said he was actually.
God, we're really getting into the really getting into the weeds there.
You said deep dive, man. We're deep. He said, yeah, he was asking for the CL16.
This is more like the subterranean level. I think.
Oh, absolutely. So that's there. And then I think there's just a couple questions more. It looks like they're about the XLAS, SL2, power setup, output, stuff like that. So we will let these go, and we'll come back to these questions when they're relevant for the stuff that Paul is talking about. So I'll let you get back to it.
Okay, so let's talk about now outputs, because remember we're going through setup for the day here. We've formatted our cards, we've set the record folder, set our scene names, set up our channels to be the sources that we want. Now we want to basically maybe route some signal to crew members on set, or feed downstream devices, or a whole myriad of different possibilities there, which I'm not going to go into. So, and again, I'm going to show you from the front panel here. We'll get onto the CL16 a bit later. But basically, you have a lot of output control on the 8 series. The Scorpio has essentially 12 outputs. You've got X1 through X10. Well, you have your left and right output on XLRs. Then you have X1 through X6 on TA3s, and then X7 through X10 on 3.5mm connectors. And then you also have your headphone outputs when you've got dual, you've got a headphone out. So you've actually got 14 outputs, and each of these outputs can be routed from its own routing matrix, so they can be totally independent, and gives you a lot of control. So let's just take a look at an output screen. Now I'm going to focus primarily on the analog outputs here. Let's come to outputs and have a look. So this menu here, LRX1 through X10, is really setting up the routing for those connectors I was just telling you about. But it can also be used to configure your AES outputs, because the AES outputs are shared with the analog outputs left, right, and your 10-pin heroes. Okay, so let's just take a look at, say, the X1 output, which is this first TA3 on the connector on the right-hand panel here. So first of all, I can actually name that output, which is pretty damn useful, right? If I need to say, know which crew member this output is going off to, maybe it's like a boom 1. I can add that here, and that will then, it shows me to the right here that I've sent my feed coming out of X1 is going off to my boom operator. That name will also appear on my CL16. Here you can see it says boom. All right, so again, all the naming remains in sync. It will also show in my, coming up here, in my output menus, output routing. So if I go to my output meter screen here, it's not what I meant to do. I meant to do that one. So you can see if I'm metering my outputs, you can see it's shown there too. So that's a really useful method to keep track of all the feeds you're sending on set. Coming back into my outputs menu, let's take a close look at X1's routing. So I can just press that or hit the edit switch here. Either way, it doesn't matter. And you've got all of this routing capability. So I can route any of the ISO channels, pre or post fade, to this output, right? I can also route any bus. As I mentioned, there's actually 12 mixed buses within the Scorpio. There's 8 within the 888, and there's 6 within the 833. And I can also route my headphone mix out of X1 output, right? And then I can loop through return feeds and also returns through to that output as well. Now, the important thing to remember here is you can only select one source here. You can't select multiple. If you want multiple signals to come out of your physical output, and X1 refers to a physical output, you need to basically create an internal mix, and then on a bus, say bus 1 or bus whatever number, and then select that for your output. So that's how you get multiple combinations of inputs and signals to that one output. All right, that's a very standard paradigm in digital live console world, and it's very much standard practice and provides all the flexibility you'll ever need. Okay, just going to disable. And here we can apply delay to an output. So for instance, if you're feeding X1 to Video Village and you need to compensate for the video feed latency coming from the camera guys, you can add that here. Individual delay per output. You've got gain of your output. You can then choose the level of your output, line -10 on mic. Now, if this is your right or left output, I can also select the output to be AES here. All right. Coming back here. And then finally, you have a mute switch here. And if I mute an output, right, there's my X1. There's my output there. If I mute, then you can see that go blue. So again, your CL16, SD remote, your controllers will let you know how you're muted. I can mute from CL16 as well, just by holding menu and then pressing the encoder. All right. Thought I'd show that while I was there. Okay, so that's mute. Now we do have a range of transport-based muting down here. So for instance, you might want that output to automatically mute when you're in stop mode, so that anyone who's listening on that output can't hear the conversation that's going on during stop. And you've got the similar options for muting on record, stop, or play. All right, and actually you can select all of them if you want. Let's go do that down here. I don't know why you do that, because then you'd effectively have a dead output altogether. All right, so that's the way you do that. Let's go back to our other outputs here. We can configure the 10-pin Heroes ports for analog or AES and choose your routings accordingly. This is where you configure all your Dante outputs. You have 32 of those on the Scorpio and 16 on the 888. So I can select any one of these. Let's just choose one at random, 27, and select any of these sources to that particular Dante output channel stream. So you've got pretty flexible routing direct from here without even having to go into Dante controller, which is the preferred way to route in any Dante network. Actually, on the subject of that, I do want to quickly mention that when you first set up, you're configuring your Dante network and your Scorpio with other Dante peripherals, you're pretty much going to do that by hooking up a computer, Mac or PC, and connecting up, instigating Dante controller, which is the free app from Ordinate, and you're going to do all your mappings there. Now, the nice thing to know is that once you've set that up and you remove the computer from the equation, that the Scorpio and the 8 series will remember the routing over a power cycle. So you don't need Dante controller again, unless you're introducing a whole other new device or setting up a new Dante network. Okay, so the 8 series does store all that routing internally. Okay, let's also take a look at our USB outputs. I mentioned before that we are a USB audio interface. So that means we can bring 2 channels of USB in, just like a mic input. You can bring in USB inputs from a computer or phone and record them to any channel. Or I might want to route stuff out via USB to a computer to provide a feed, maybe over IP or what have you to someone remotely located. So in here again, you can select a USB output and select any of these signals as well. Any of these signals to be routed there. All right. Coming out, and then finally we have where you can configure your headphone presets, which is pretty important. You've got many headphone presets. So let's come up here, go back to my main screen. I'm going to come to here. So turn off the slate. Now, if I press my headphone encoder in the main screen, it's going to bring me up my preset list. There's a bunch of factory defaults here, left, right, stereo, going down to bus 1. And then you've got all these user programmable presets 1 through 12. And you can name these and route any combination of sources to those presets. Useful shortcut is instead of having to scroll there to select a preset, I can bring these up by using a PFL toggle shortcut. So I'm just going to zoom out here to show you this. If I hold the headphone encoder and then move PFL 1, that's going to give me preset 1. Hold the headphone encoder, hit the PFL 2, that's preset 2, all the way along, 4, 5, 6. If I want to go to preset 12, there. So it's a very quick way to jump to those headphone presets without having to go into a menu or scroll a list. Let's come back here again. Let's show you how to configure those presets very quickly. Whoops, out, whoops. Bloody Nora. What's going on here? Here we go. Headphone presets. So let's select, say, preset 2. Here I can name it to give it a useful descriptive name. I can edit it, and then from here I can configure whatever signal is going to the left headphone output and the right headphone output. Okay. You can select any of these sources for each of the left headphone and the right headphone. Okay, mixes, and here this is a full bus capability, so you can have multiple. You can select multiple things here. So I could have a mix of pre-fade and post-fade ISOs. You can see that one's orange, that means post-fade. That one's green, so that means pre-fade. I could have buses mixed in with that as well, and returns and all sorts going on. So you can really create very complex feeds there. And then you can use this toggle switch to basically mono whatever mix you've created into both ears, or apply an MS decoder to that mix you've created. So very powerful headphone mixing matrix there. And you've got 12 presets, remember, and they can all be independent with their own mix. Notice a couple of other controls here. You've got an unlist feature, which is, if you're only using a few presets, you might not want all 12 presets available. So I can unlist them, whoops, like so. Actually, there. Where am I here? Unlist, unlist. So notice they gray out. And that means when I go to my main screen, you'll see that I've got a reduced set of presets here. I removed a bunch of them, right? So if you only need a few, why have such a long list? All right, you can do that from there. Come in here and then go back down to here. And finally, you do have, I'm going to just bring that one back. So that's that one. You've also got the ability to make a headphone preset a favorite using this toggle here. And that means you can very quickly recall it just by moving that favorite toggle. But you're all familiar with that, I'm sure. Okay, so that's our outputs. Now, what we need to do now is talk about buses. And this is where the 8 series really sort of moves away from anything like we've done before on the 7 series or the 6 series. In our previous product lines, essentially the outputs were hardwired to buses. With the 8 series, buses are totally independent. They're internal routing points where you can create multiple mixes and then select any of those mixes to any of the physical outputs. All right. So if I go to my buses menu here, what am I doing here? You notice on the Scorpio, we have 12 buses. Now, obviously left and right are typically our main left and right mix. So you're going to leave them routed like this, where you've got all the ISOs routed post fade, which is orange. Okay. And also the same for R. Okay. So that's typically the way you're going to work if your left right is your main stereo mix. But you have a bunch of other mix buses as well, B1 through B10. On the 888, there's 8 of these buses, and on the 833, there's 6. But let's just take a look at one of these buses. Bus 1, for instance. Okay. Now you've got a huge amount of flexibility here. And I don't know if the colors are really making it hard to see the different colors, probably is, but with a bus, you can select any, like with the headphone presets, you can select any combination of these checkboxes on the screen. Okay, I could have all my ISOs, a bit of the right bus, a bit of return to a return A2. I could have really any form of mixing there, right? And with your ISOs, I can route to the bus either, let's say, look at channel 1 here. I can unroute that, so it's off. If I press that select again, I'm now routing channel 1 pre-fade. If I press again, I'm now routing that channel post-fade. And if I press again, that's actually the color blue. It's hard for you to see, but now I'm actually sending that channel via its own independent send gain, not dependent upon the fader, the physical fader of the device. So this is how you can create totally independent mixes from the left-right mix. Why would you want to do that? Well, there's multiple reasons. You might, a director or producer might want to hear a particular actor louder or quieter, or a group of actors louder and quieter than others. But you don't want your deliverable mix to be affected by that. So here, yeah, aux sends, exactly. That's what it is. It's bus sends, aux sends. So this is a typical digital live console sort of feature. It's used extensively in the live music scene, where every musician on stage wants their own mix. You know, they typically want to hear themselves louder and what have you. So you can create all these different aux sends. Now we've got 10 of them on Scorpio, so it's a huge amount of flexibility there. We also have sends on faders mode, and that really starts to come into its own when you are using the CL16 down here. Now I can actually configure the CL16 such that these fader knobs become my aux sends to any of the 10 buses. So I can very much dive in there and create alternate mixes very quickly. Now, if you're using a controller with motorized faders, you can actually bring those bus sends on faders. But on the CL16, these are not motorized. These are P&G faders. And we specifically made that choice because they feel the smoothest out there. And we know that our users appreciate good feeling faders. All right, more on that hopefully a bit later. So that's bus sends. And you have 10 of them. So it gives you a huge range of flexibility there. Let's stop right there and see if we've got any questions on outputs or buses, Joe.
Looks like just the one from Martin Schulte. Says, what does the linked LR option do? and the L and R output setup screen.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually on all the bus screens, and you can see it actually here as well in the bus one screen, but it's there on all the outputs and buses screens. And it basically, if you're sending a stereo feed to a downstream device, what this does is link the neighboring buses or outputs, odd and even buses or outputs, such that the gain control affects both at the same time, and mutes work at the same time. So you're treating that as a single stereo feed. Does that make sense?
Okay. This is from Sean Hampton. It applies a little bit to when we were talking about inputs. He's looking for a demonstration on how to adjust mid-side balance and monitoring. Paul, I think you touched a little bit on monitoring with the headphone presets. There is a mid-side preset that we have.
Yeah, so your pan control essentially becomes like a balance control between mid and side. So dead center, it's going to be a stereo MS mix of those two signals, and moving it all over to one side is you're only going to get the mono mic, and if you move it all onto the other side, it's just going to be the side mic. So that's essentially that.
Great. From Tim and Angie Vanderbroek, hope I'm saying that right. What's the difference between a bus pre-fade and a bus send?
Okay, so yeah, in this screen here, that's actually referring to the way the channel is being routed to this bus. So in the case of this example, I'm looking at bus one routing. So I'm choosing which signals out of all these checkboxes I'm routing to this bus. And as you can see at the moment, I've got all 32 ISOs routed to that bus. I could have other things added to that if I wanted to. Now, the pre and post send indicator just it's a key to let you know what color reflects how you're routing these ISO channels to this bus. So for instance, if I come along here and I want to decide how ISO 1 is being routed to bus 1, at the moment it's not being routed at all. I've just turned it off. Likewise with channel 3. But I can now choose to route one by selecting it, and that is green right now. I don't know if you can see that, but that means I'm sending that channel pre-fade to this bus. So it's not going to be affected by the main faders. It's only going to be dependent upon the trim gain control. And then if I select that again, you can see that's actually turned orange. That means I'm now routing post that channel 1, post fade to that bus. Okay, which is now going to be dependent on the fader level being sent from channel 1's fader. And then the third position is this aux send. Now that's actually blue, which is this box down here. This is actually blue right now. And now I'm sending that channel 1 to bus 1 via its own send gain value. And you'll notice that when I select a channel that's blue, keep your eye on this toggle down here. Okay, it's grayed out at the moment. If I then select 1, it's ungraded. And the reason why it's ungraded is because I've selected it as a send. This is blue now. So that's now ungraded. Now, so now I can now adjust its own individual send gain using this switch. It's currently set to -infinity. So it's not being sent at all to bus 1. Okay. But if I now move this here, I can now adjust the amount I want to send that channel 1 in this case, to this bus. So it's like its own independent fader. All right. Up to, again, like the main fader is up to 16 dBs of gain. All right. So you can actually do this from the front panel of the Scorpio as well. All right. Send gain becomes much more easy to set up when you're using a CL16. Okay. Any other questions?
Looks like that covered it. There was yeah, BK had a question about creating a submix, but yeah, Paul just went over it, and that's that.
Okay.
Yeah, looks like we can move on.
I'm gonna move on here. there's so much to talk about. And I do want to get onto the controllers and SDR and SL2 as well. So when is the next webinar? Good question. We might need one at this rate. Let's talk about something which we haven't spoken about at all. And I just want to quickly mention this, by the way, because in terms of front panel shortcuts on the 8 series, we've already mentioned like shortcuts like using the headphone encoder and the PFL switch to get to different headphone presets just by holding the encoder and doing that. There's a similar paradigm also for meter presets, because there's multiple ways you can configure the presets here. These are all the different, whoops, no, that's not it. Here, these are all the different meter presets, and you can customize these, and then you can recall them by holding the meter button. And again, using the PFL, you can see the screen changing as I select different presets. And you can put these on in any order you like on the PFLs. And then you've also got a similar thing for your menus. We have a menu. You can bring up your favorite menu instead of having to dive into all these menus and sub menus to get to your commonly used menus. You can actually do that by programming shortcuts by holding menu and then moving through the presets again. Okay, so that's a way you can customize the front panel interface for quick navigation to your favorite menus. And then you've got a similar thing also for your buses. I can hold this select encoder and do bus 1, bus 2, bus 3, bus 4, bus 5, bus 6. So a very quick way to jump to your bus routing screen. All right. Okay. Let's now talk. Oh God, there's just so much. I don't know where to go next. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit more about actual record capability here. I'm not going to cover timecode, but suffice to say, you've got every timecode option you need to be a professional sound mixer. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. We've got all your different modes, including auto mute modes as well, which means that during stop mode, you're not actually outputting timecode, and you can use that to trigger external devices that are set to record run or stuff like that. So, and actually going in there again, I just want to point out one other very important thing. So, those of you who asked for an option to have big timecode or big A time, that is now there. We know that some of you prefer that instead of big timecode. So that means in your main home screen display on the 8 series, instead of having a big timecode field in the bottom left-hand corner, you can switch that to be A time and vice versa. So that's there. I'm going to leave that as timecode. And about sync reference, you can synchronize to many different types of sync ref. Word clock and AAS are typical, but in this 8 series, you can also synchronize to actually the timecode stream itself, which is very useful, because now you actually don't need 2 separate cables to ensure accurate timecode. You can do it all with just the timecode cable, and you don't need a separate word clock cable. We essentially, when you're set to LTC in, extracting the word clock signal from the actual timecode count itself, and we can lock to it very, very accurately. And so that's a neat feature. Right. Yes, let's get into the record and play menu here. Okay, so yes, we've got all our sample rates up to 192. Now, the one amazing thing about the 8 series is it is so fast and powerful. I can record all 36 tracks of Scorpio across 3 media simultaneously at up to 96K, or 18 tracks of 192K across all 3 media at 192K. That's a huge amount of data. That's just vast. And there's no other system on the planet which can handle that. I mean, if you tried to do that with Pro Tools, I'm sure it'd keel over. So you've got a huge amount of recording data rate power in these devices. And we spent a lot of time totally rewriting the record and playback engine on the 8 series to make this possible. So there it is. So typically 48, 24 or 16 bit depth. You have pre-roll time up to 10 seconds, which is what you'd expect. While we're here, I should mention post-roll time, which is a new feature on the 8 series, which essentially means that if you can create a period of time, say 5 seconds, you've got up to 10 seconds here. And if you're, let's just go back to here, just want to see what I'm doing. If I'm, say, recording and the director shouts cut or what have you, you do that and actually you missed a tail slate. So during that post-roll period, I can go back into, during that post-roll period, if I hit record again, it's going to carry on recording into the same take without going into a new take, which a lot of people miss the tail slates and what have you, or accidentally cut too soon. So as long as you hit the record knob within that post-roll period, if I hit stop, you can see it's still spinning and it's still recording in take one and still recording in take one. Now, if I actually do legitimately want to stop straight away, I can press that and then press it again, and it will actually finalize the file properly. Okay, so that's a cool new feature. Let's go back into our record menu down here. And let's take a look at the routing menu here. So we've got a lot of flexibility in the way you route tracks to each media. And you can see here we've got 3 rows, SSD, the internal drive, and then the SD1 and SD2 cards. And again, there's a key down here to let you know what format you're sending to those drives. Currently, I'm selecting all my tracks, or any track that's armed will be basically going to every media. But I can set this independently. I can set, maybe I just want all on my SSD, but I want my SD1 to be mono, say, mono wave files instead of polyphonic files. Green is monophonic. And I want just the ISOs and left right to go. I'm not interested in the bus 1, 2 mix. And then maybe on my SD2 card, I just want to send, I don't know, let's say a transcription file, orange. So that's going to be an AAC transcription file. And you can determine the bit rate of that AAC file here. Okay. Suitable for emailing. It's much smaller size, but it's still very good quality. All right, so you can set up all these different custom routings and explore that for sure. And then we've got the ability to choose what wave format you want to use. Now we've got 2 options, RF64 or BWF, which stands for broadcast wave, which is the most common format out there, broadcast wave. It's just a standard wave file, polyphonic or monophonic, which can be read by any system. The only downside, and it's a big downside of broadcast wave, is it's limited to 4 gigabytes in size, which, especially if you're doing polyphonic file recording, that you can easily reach that, especially in high track count situations. If you're doing 20, 24 tracks, you're going to get to that 4 gigabyte limit, within less than 20 minutes, So if you're doing high track count, long form recording, you'd probably be better off using RF64, which doesn't have a 4 gigabyte limit. In fact, it's a 64-bit format, so it actually allows file sizes in excess of a terabyte. You're never going to get reach a limit there. Now, I should say that when you do have a 4 gigabyte split, 8 series ensures that it splits to the next take sample seamlessly, so that when you join those takes in a DAW, there'll be no missing audio at all. And the other thing I want to point out here is that you have got, with RF64, it will actually create a BWF file to start with. As soon as it gets to 4 GB, it will then convert to RF64. All right. So that's our record media. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about transport right now, because we added a pretty useful feature in version 7, cue points. Okay, so what that means is cue points are really useful for, during record or playback. You can lay a cue mark at a specific location within the playback or record, so that you can easily review that at a later stage by playing back and then just jumping directly to that cue mark instead of having to fast forward through lots of material. The nice thing about our cue marks is not only can you locate them on our own 8 series very easily, you can also they can also be read by certain workstations, computer workstations like Reaper and Adobe Audition. There are others, but Adobe Audition and Reaper are the main ones. We conform to the industry standard cue chunk methodology. Now, sadly, some DAWs don't support that. For instance, Pro Tools is the obvious one there. I don't know why they haven't supported that. I would encourage you to all get on the phone to Avid to make that happen. So that's cue points. So it's very easy. Let me demonstrate how that works. Okay, it's warning me that I need to adjust my routing. So I'm just going to come back to here and go to, I'm going to turn off some of this stuff, record, play, and then go to my track to media routing. And then I'm just going to set this to all for the time being. It's just easier for demonstration purposes. Okay, and then I'm also going to turn this to BWF because cue points are not supported with RF64 format right now. They are with standard broadcast wave. That's an important bit of information for you. So I hit record. So I'm in the middle of record, and keep your eye on this area of the display as I lay a cue mark. Now, I can create, the standard default method for creating a cue mark is to hold the select encoder in and then move the joystick to the right, okay? And now you can see Q01 appeared. I can add another and another, okay? If I laid a cue mark and I actually didn't want it, I can delete it by going the other way. That's gone back to 2. And these are accurate to 1/10 of a second, these cue marks are pretty damn accurate, okay? So let's just lay another. Now, if you don't like this two-handed approach, you can map cue mark, adding cue marks and deleting cue marks to these toggle switches, or you can map adding a cue mark to any button on a controller. So you can really set this up exactly the way you want. Okay, let's just stop the recording here. And as I said, I can go to play. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I meant to do this, playback. And just by jumping, I can jump to cue marks now using the fast forward, a quick flick on the, I can quickly go back, right? So you can't set cue marks from SD remote right yet, but it's a damn good idea. So that is really useful. I mean, especially if you're doing long, super long takes like classical recording or reality show stuff, and you need to be able to, at the end of a long hour or 2 hour long recording, just be able to jump straight there rather than having to fast forward randomly through a super long take. Very useful. And even if you haven't laid any cue marks, a really nice touch here is if you are in play and you jump and you hit the fast forward, flick the fast forward on, it's going to jump right to the end of the take, to the last sort of frame of the take. And then you can very quickly sort of scroll back a few seconds to check the audio there. It's like a confidence check. With that, now you can do that, get to the end of the take very quickly, do a quick confidence check. Yep, that was all there, that's clean, the audio was good. And you can do that without having to fast forward through reams of material. All right. So that's cue marks. That was just added in version 7 to wild fanfare. Now, I do want to mention for those who don't know this, that this is the only recorder, I believe, out there that you can arm during record. And again, that's a very useful feature for things like reality, where you're shooting a scene and you need to bring in some other talent is coming into that scene, and then you need to be able to arm them. So you can do that while in record. I'm just going to turn off my post roll because it's just slowing things down a little bit for me in this demo. Set that to 0. And so for instance, there's multiple ways. I can do this from a CL16. I can do this from the front panel. I can do it from SD remote. But essentially, if I'm recording, which I am now, and I want to say bring in track 9, I can do that on the fly. There you go. It's not, I didn't have to stop. And every other device out there that I know of, you have to stop. Now, how is it doing this? Well, what it's doing is it's actually splitting the take. So let's do that again so you can see. Let's have a look at our take up here. So the next take is going to be 100T05. All right, hit record. And now I'm going to bring in, say, another track here, another actor or something, and just do the, I could do this in CL16. I'm just demonstrating it here right now. So as I do that, it will automatically split that. It's still got the same scene and take number. It's just put an appendix, a suffix A on that file name, so that now you know this is all part of the same scene and take. It was all done in the one recording, but you're just doing this during, without stopping your arming. Now, the nice thing about this is if you have to bring in multiple talent, and you don't want to have all these extra splits going on, because if I was going to bring in 11, then 12, then 13 and 14, you wouldn't want like that for there to be 4 splits. You can actually do it all in one go by essentially holding the meter button, then pressing in the select encoder and rotating. So I'm going to bring in 11, 12, and 13 simultaneously. So hold in, and then when I let go, it's brought in those 3 actors at one go and just created 1 split. All right, it's really useful. Now I can do that again. I can also take out talent in the middle of record as well. So let me take out, say, 13 to 10, hold, press in the select encoder, and then release. And it's going to create a new take, 105 take C. All right, all while I'm recording. So it's really useful function, that is. All right, I am, because we've been going for a long time already. I think I'm going to move to SD remote for a bit. Or actually, let's take a look at the SL. Well, what do we want to hear? Do we want to hear about the SL2, or do we want to hear about the SD remote? SL2. Okay, let's go to the SL2. They were quickest off the mark. So here we go. Now, just to let you know, everybody, that let's just come here a little bit, zoom out a little bit. Okay, hopefully you're all seeing that okay. So just to let you all know that we did a Sound Summit video the other day, and John did a nice overview of the functionality of the SL2. So you can look at that too. But here we see an SL2 fitted to the 833. In this case, I've got like a smart battery on top here, running the whole thing off a smart battery. You can see that I'm running a Electro SRB at the minute and an A10 RX. This is one of the big advantages of the whole super slot protocol, which Sound Devices developed, is that it's receiver manufacturer agnostic. So you can use ours, the A10 RXs, you can use Electrosonics, SRBs and SRCs, and even the SRC 941. You can use Wizicom, MCR 42 and 54, the Sennheiser 6042, And we are also working with Sony on their new digital DWR as well. And that's not available yet. So the SL2 is actually supports up to 8 channels. That's 4 channels per slot. So we've got 2 slots, and you can have up to 4 channels per slot. Now, currently, there's only one receiver type out there which supports the 4 channels, and you all know the answer to that, the MCR 54. So that's the way you can get 4 channels in there, a total of 8 channels. Now, the SL2 has antenna inputs, A and B, so diversity, and diversity antenna inputs here, and the RF distribution is all internal, so that's looped through to each receiver. You also have a couple of AUX connectors on the side panels, which allow you to take those antenna feeds and loop them to other receivers or other RF distribution boxes. What else do we have? On the rear of the SL2, there are 4 AES inputs as well. So that gives you a total of 6 on the 833 and a total of 8 on the Scorpio. And we also have a couple of DC outputs as well on the SL2, which you can be used for powering external peripherals like transmitters, etc. And you've got 0.5 amp per output there. Now, the nice thing about this system is you don't need any face plates to lock the receivers in. You just slide in the receiver, and there's a quick release grip mechanism here. Don't know if you can see it, but on the right hand side just here, there's a release mechanism. But when you slot in these receivers, we have a very robust mechanism which grabs the receivers so that they can't fall out. But what this means is it's very quick for you to swap out your receivers if you need to do that. Okay. What else do I want to talk about here? So yeah, let's talk about filtering. So let's just go back to the main menu here, and I'm going to control this via my little wireless keyboard here. So go into the menu, and I'm going to scroll down to a few things that I need to show you. So if you go into your system menu here, you'll notice a menu down here called the expansion port. So this is a port on the top of all the 8 series. It's a multi-pin connector. And this is designed for connecting various peripherals, the SL2 being one of them, and the XL AS being the other one currently available. All right. So there's the connector. And it's not a ribbon cable. You don't join these things via a ribbon cable, which is obviously susceptible to damage. This is actually a connector which totally connects to the connector underneath the top panel, and then it screws in. So it's super robust. Okay. So you can turn on and off your expansion port here. In fact, I'll just demonstrate that here. Right, and when I do that, notice that the receivers go off. Now, you might want to do this if you're not needing the receivers one time. You want to save power. So why not just disable the expansion port and save yourselves a handful of watts? Worth doing. So come back in here. I'm going to turn that back on, and it will obviously take a little while to connect those receivers, because it does need to identify the models connected, but it's pretty quick, as you can see just there, and we've already got signal coming through. So let's come out of that menu now, and when you enable that slot, you'll see this other menu here called Super Slot, which I can access. And just to let you know, go back to my meter screen, there's a nice shortcut for jumping to that menu. It's meter plus headphone. Boom. and you're directly into that menu now without having to go via the main menu. So this is a new layout. Let's zoom in a little bit closer here. All right. So this is the main SL2 screen. We call it the receiver overview, and you can see it's comprising of 8 rows, each row corresponding to a channel. We have channels A1 through A4, which corresponds to the 4 channels that are in for slot 1, and then you have B1 through B4 here, which corresponds to the up to 4 channels you can get from slot 2 or slot B. Now this screen's really useful because it gives you an overview of your RF frequency that you've selected, a transmitter battery level here on the right hand side. It's got a circle here which is record status of your transmitters. Obviously not all wireless support that, but our A10 does. You have built-in recording capability there, so when the transmitters are recording you'll see a red dot there. To the left of that, just here, we have these RF history graphs, which basically just show you the last X number of seconds of RF history. Now, green is good. I want to see what happens if I take out an antenna, see if I can drop the signal. So now you can see, as I sort of reduce the incoming RF signal, that you can see the RF history in action there. There was like a little bit of a red drop out there at that point, and now we're seeing lower RF signal coming in. All right, so this shows you the last I'm going to just leave that off for the time being, don't need it for now. All right, so that's RF history. Now you can set that RF history to be anything from 30 seconds all the way up to 600 seconds. So you can see the last 10 minutes of RF history there. All right. Let's now, and then you've got, it shows you where this antenna symbol here shows you whether you're locked to the transmitter. It's actually receiving signal on that frequency. Now, let's take a look at the options menu just here. Boom. And this allows me to set up global SL2 settings. So let's take a look here. The first one is receiver slot power. And again, this is a useful tool for reducing power consumption if you don't need both receivers. So for instance, in this case, say, I'm not using the Electro, I'm only using the A10, so I can turn that off and save myself some power. All right, let's turn it back on. Boom. Okay, let's go back up a menu. Now you have a menu which allows you to enable the DC outputs, which are on the rear panel of the SL2. So you can turn that on or off there. And then we have setting, if you're using active antennas or smart antennas, you can turn on the bias power the antennas require here, and you've got like 12 volts on both the A and the B antenna inputs there. Okay, and then you have the ability to, there's attenuation on both the antennas, and you can apply up to 18 dBs of attenuation in 6 dB steps. So if you're coming in super hot and you need to drop that to prevent saturation, you can do that here. And then you've got your antenna filtering. Now these are, they're basically 2 levels of filtering on an SL2, right? There's the more coarse wideband filtering on the antenna inputs, which help to remove just general RF noise outside those bands. They're not super steep. They're intended to be very, very low noise filters. but coarse. And then the output from that filter section then goes to the front, into the front end filters of your actual receivers, which will actually provide your more brick wall filtering that you require. So it's the combination of those two things gives great performance and helps with range from any receiver. Now these are hardware filters, very high quality hardware filters, and these are the different ranges that you have. Okay, and you have wideband, which is essentially letting in every bit of RF from the environment come in right there. Okay, and then below that you have a new menu, actually, which you introduced this in version 7, which allows you to turn on or off antenna LEDs here. Now this is useful in knowing what RF is in the environment. So if I turn those on and bring a transmitter really near, you can see, just adjust the camera slightly. Okay, so you can see that B LED here go on and off. Now that's to let you know whether you're in danger of oversaturating the RF input stage, which can result in distortion and dropouts. So it's useful information. We've calibrated it for all the different receiver types. It will go red when there's the yellow is a warning that you're getting close to oversaturation, and the red is like you're in danger of getting dropouts or serious distortions. So that's what those LEDs for. If you don't want them, you can turn them off, but those LEDs are telling you the truth. If you've got a transmitter in the bag with relatively high power, you will see some bleed in there, even if that transmitter is outside the antenna filter, because these antenna filters are not the front end antenna filters here and here. The filtering on these and here are a gradual slope to ensure high quality, ultra low noise performance. Okay, moving on here. The SL2 also will support smart antennas as well, which currently the only one that we support is the WYSICOM LFA. So you can connect that and control remotely things like the antenna gain, the antenna frequency, and a whole bunch of other parameters on that. And there's a dedicated menu just here. It's grayed out right now because I don't have one connected. But that's really useful because it allows you to place the antenna much closer to the action and control it over coax. And then the last menu down here is where you can choose the length of your RF history. I mentioned before that you could have up to 10 minutes worth. So that's what you do. Let's see, coming back up a menu, let's go back to our receiver overview here. Now I can scan. When you hit RF scan from this page, this overview page, it's going to use all of the receivers connected to perform that scan to give robust and fast results. Now, if I actually go and select an individual receiver using this select encoder here, I'm going to just say jump into B1 right here. Press it. Now I'm seeing the individual receiver setup overview screen. Okay. And I can actually access that screen also directly from the channel screen. So if I go into the channel screen and go to my routing, because I've selected B1 there, I can access it via here, RX setup. So here you get a nice big display of the RF history. I can set my frequency in either megahertz or TV channels or sub channels. I get to see much more detailed information on things like high pass filter, record status. What you see here is going to be dependent upon the manufacturer's model. Like with the A10 receiver, You can, because it records, you can see the transmitter recording status, the high pass filter, also whether the transmitter itself is limiting, because we read that metadata over the air, and whether the actual transmitter itself is overloading. We receive all that information. With a WYSICOM, you know, there'll be different information, and likewise with electrosonics and what have you. Now, if I instigate RF scan from here, from the receiver page, it's only going to use that receiver to scan, not all of the receivers. And then I can make other settings to that particular receiver by going into its options menu. And again, what you see here is going to very much be dependent upon the receiver type. Okay, they all have their own different menu controls, but suffice to say, there's virtually no reason why you would need to go actually into the receiver's menu itself using its own front panel. It can all be achieved from here. I'm going to just do a quick RF scan here. Well, say quick. One thing it's really important to know is that the way the architecture of the SL2, and this goes to the SL6 as well, is if you have a combination of receiver types and one of them is an analog, then the system will automatically default all the receivers to analog mode. You only get digital audio connection from the receivers to the SL2 if all the receivers are digital, have digital outputs and are set to digital outputs. In this case, because Electrosonics SRB is an analog output only receiver, this is doing the scan. Even the A10 is running in analog mode right now as well. And I'm talking about the audio going between the SL2 and the actual 833 here. So there's the scan that's done. Now I can obviously use my select encoder to zoom in, and I can also use my headphone encoder to scan through to the spectrum to look for a clean spot. Here, for instance, I'm going to select that, and now I can choose where to assign that selected frequency. Okay. All right. That's pretty much the SL2. Any questions on that before I move on?
Yeah, just a few. From Phil Bax, is the SRB in your demo machine fitted with a super slot base plate, or is it the original Unislot? And will the Unislot version work just like it did with the SL6?
Yeah, it will work with Unislot base. Obviously, you're just not going to get any of that super slot niceness. It's only going to be essentially power and audio, right? So yeah, but it will work.
This one goes back just a little bit to our last session, but I wanted to ask it because it's a good one. From Sean Hamilton asking, can you create cue marks during playback?
Yes, you can. I'm amazed I didn't even demonstrate that. Yes, so exactly the same. I hit play and then just use the same add cue mark shortcut to add cue marks. Absolutely.
Okay. So this one from Henry. How would you use the XLAES with the SL2 or SL6? Well, it's one or the other, unfortunately. So they all use the same port.
Yeah, and there's no expansion port on the top of the SL2, so it's either or. But just so you know, because the SL2 has its own AAS ports, you can select anything from any of the slot channels, A1 through A4, B1 through B4, or any combination of those with AAS 1 through 4 that are on the back of the SL2. So you've still got access to AAS, as well as the AAS that already still exists on the XLR on the left-hand panel.
Excuse me. I think this is, there's a question from Ken. He's asking if we have the ability to create a narrower RF filter.
I'm curious as to why that's necessary. The narrow, really brick wall filters are actually on the front end of the receivers themselves. Our filters on the SL2 are extremely high quality filters with very low noise, and good antenna filter design to get low noise you have to do it with hardware. So there's no software. We cannot control the bandwidth of those filters essentially via software. They are hardware, fixed hardware.
Doesn't look like we have any more SL2 questions.
But a combination of those those broader, coarser filters on the front end, followed by the real fine brick wall filters on the receivers, should give you everything you need. Okay, next, shall I move on?
Yeah, no more SL2 questions. I think we're good.
Okay, so just flip the camera towards, I want to talk about SD remote now a little bit. How long have I been going? A long time.
2.5 hours coming up.
Oh, is everyone ready to go?
Yeah, we're still got quite a few attendees.
Okay, well, I'll carry on then until people wander out. Okay, so just getting warmed up. Oh my God. All right. Okay. So here's SD remote. I'm currently running on an Android, and obviously SD remote, well, not obviously, also can run on an iPad. And before you even ask, I know the question that's going to come up is, are we going to make it compatible with smartphones, iPhone, etc.? Yes, we're working on it, and we've said this multiple times. It's in the works, and we'll get it to you as soon as it's reliable and solid. SD remote, Android and iOS compatible. You can, with Android, connect to your 8 series either via a hardwired USB link. So you'd connect this to your USB port on your 8 series. And bear in mind, I haven't mentioned this yet, that the 8 series USB-A port can actually support USB hubs as well. So if you're using it for SD remote, you can still connect other controllers and USB keyboards into that hub and have control of the 8 series from multiple different sources. And you also have Bluetooth control. And there is a built-in antenna port. You can see the antenna here. So there's built-in Bluetooth on all the 8 series, and this antenna will give you some really good range on Bluetooth. I've had up to like 50, 60 meters. It's really very good at distance. So use that antenna. And it's worth noting that the iOS devices only support Bluetooth anyway. You don't have USB hardwired, but that's fine. It's a robust connection over Bluetooth, so no need to worry. So hopefully you can see that clearly. So we've just released version 7 firmware for the 8 series and SD remote, and we added a whole bunch of functionality on SD remote too, which wasn't there previously. And the most obvious thing there is now we have a 16 channel meter view for the 888 and Scorpio. And so I'm currently connected to my Scorpio right now. So you can see the time code. It says 448.51, and coming over here, you can see that as well on the display. So you know that I'm not lying. There it is. Done. And I actually, in this particular setup, I actually have another tablet here. So I've got 2 tablets right now connected to my Scorpio. This one's connected via USB, and this one I've got connected via Bluetooth. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to have one screen which is just dedicated to my take list and take editing. I just want to leave it on that screen, and then leave this one permanently on my 16 channels, right? So I can have 2 screens running different tabs. Pretty nice. You can do that, but you have to have one on USB and one on Bluetooth. actually, if you have an Android, you could actually connect 2 tablets via USB, and they would act as 2 separate controllers. So you could still do that with 2 Androids. Okay, so that's the number one answer. You've still got your 8 channel views here. Okay, now we have changed the layout of this, and I think most people will be very happy about this, and that is we remove the mute buttons from this screen, and because you don't want to be accidentally muting an input from a touch screen. That's a disaster. So now muting and actually soloing is in a new channel screen. So I'm going to show you that. Let's go to channel 1 channel screen. So now you touch the, this is all new, by the way. This is, you've got your 8 channel screens underneath here, and you can see the various functions. Well, here's your mute now. It's in your channel screen, so I can hit that and it will now mute the input that you just saw just there. All right. By default, as soon as you go into this channel screen, it's going to solo that particular input, that channel, but I can very quickly turn that off if I want to listen to the mix. I have got, I'm going to turn off mute there. I've got now my record arm up here. Now this is nice because I think a lot of users prefer to not be able to arm from the main screen here, because again, the dangers of accidentally arming or disarming. So you can leave, the arm lock now is on by default, always when you start up the app, so that you can't accidentally go in there, but you can disable that and arm if you want to. But even with arm lock on here, you can come to this screen and still arm. Because there's like a layer of protection here, we felt it was okay to leave this still enabled. The next line down allows you to name your channel, and then you've got trim gain control. So this is really useful, being able to adjust your trim, faders, and pan, all from SD Remote now. That gives you a lot of flexibility and to be able to wander around a set and adjust levels and venues, and just be able to adjust levels and hear the effects of your adjustments without being right at your card. Okay. And you can very quickly switch between channels here. And if you're on a 16 channel view, I can do that from here as well. All right. So there we have it. You still, obviously for the main screen, I can come in here and edit channel names. So we haven't taken anything away there. So that's all new. The other thing which is a minor improvement is you can't accidentally disconnect now when you hit the connect icon up here. It will, well, if you're set to Bluetooth, that is, if you touch that icon accidentally, it's going to show you, are you sure you want to break connection? So that prevents accidental logging out of SD Remote. A few other things I want to show you just here. In the settings page, you have, well, let's go back to our main screen. I didn't really talk about this. You've got the faders here on the main screen as well, right? Not just in your 8-channel view, but also in your 16-channel view, okay? Now, so you can do a mix from here. Now, there's a system which we've developed with the 8 series to keep all faders in sync. And what I mean by that is if I've adjusted a fader here on, say, channel 3, and then I go to the front panel of my 8 series, I don't want it to suddenly jump to the new value when I start rotating this pot, because that'd be a sudden jump in audio. So we've developed a system called soft fader catch, which will not adjust the audio level from another control interface until you reach that last stored value. And that works with both faders and trims, okay? And it works between the CL16 and the 8 series itself, and even controllers like the Sonosax as well. All right, so that's you can enable that feature in the controllers menu. Now, many of you are not going to want faders on your SD remote. You're going to be using the CL16 faders because they just feel a lot nicer. I'm actually moving the CL16 faders right now, and you can see that the faders on SD remote are following. But if you don't want faders, accidentally hit the faders on SD remote, you can actually turn those off by hiding them. Whoops, come here. All right, so now if I go back to that screen, you can see the faders are no longer there and you can't accidentally adjust them. There is one other feature I want to show you here. And that is file transfer mode. So I can now instigate file transfer mode from here, which is particularly useful if you're remote from set and need to put the 8 series into file transfer mode so that you can drag the files across the internet. I've done some videos on this on IP control from remote locations and how SD remote can be used for that. I'm not going to cover that now because that's a whole separate subject, but I have done a video on it with Peter Schneider from Gotham Sound. So it's probably worth checking out. But I can do that here. Let me just demonstrate what happens if I flick this switch. It's going to go into file transfer mode. Whoops. Okay. And you can see it says devices in file transfer mode. I can exit out by touching this. You can see that on my screen, it's now in file transfer mode. I can then, I'm currently hooked. I think I've got this iPad currently hooked up to my Scorpio via USB. So in theory, I should be able to come in here, open up the Files app on my iPad, and you can see that because I'm in file transfer mode, that my 3 Scorpio drives, the internal SSD and the 2 SD cards, are now mounted to my iPad, and I can see the contents of each of those media. The nice thing about that is I can, let's just come into here. Let's go into episode 1. This is where I've been recording everything, I believe. So here's my files, right? I can select a file and do all sorts of things like copy, duplicate, move, delete, info, quick look, tags, rename, share, compress, do all sorts of things from this app, all just for a simple USB connection, having put it all into file transfer mode from SD remote. That's pretty cool. Anyway, that's just a side story, really. I'm going to exit file transfer mode now. Boom. And the 8 series goes back to normal operation mode. Any questions?
Yeah. Ken Goodwin is looking for a demonstration of how the fader on the control surface or the app overwrite each other. So I think they're just looking for a demo of how soft pickup's working.
Well, let's do this. Let's do this with the CL16 right now.
Sure.
So let's see. So I'm just going to come up here, zoom in a bit so you can see what's going on. So there's a menu here. If you go into our controllers menu, down here, controllers. And there's a whole range of features here, which I haven't even got into yet, including the ability to map and learn buttons on your controller. But that's subject for another time. So let's come down to here. So it's called Soft Fader Trim Pickup. That's off by default. So I'm turning that on now. Okay, yeah, that's on. So now, I don't know if I can demonstrate this at the same time because you need to be able to see the screen really. Okay. Okay, how am I going to do this? I might be able to. So, right, I'm adjusting. Let's just do this on channel 14 right now. Okay, as you can see, I'm adjusting channel 14, right? You can see it here. The fader's being adjusted. Can you see that? Right? Can you see that, everybody?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. Okay, so you also notice that the gain value is displayed in the bottom of the screen here, right? As I adjust a fader. So you get to see it in multiple places. I'm also seeing it on SDR at the same time, by the way, but I can't demonstrate that right now. So actually 14 is a bad choice because I really want a dedicated fader. So I'm going to do this with channel 6, all right? Because I've got a nice big pot here, which I'm going to set to somewhere up there. Okay. So channel 6, you can see that it's adjusting the gain value just there, and it's adjusting the gain value in the display. All right. So if I say set this fader to, I'd mixed it low to say about, well, in this case, about -25. If then I go over to my fader on the Scorpio front panel, which is set pretty high at the minute, if I didn't have soft fader pickup turned on and I move this fractionally, it's going to immediately pick up the value and you're going to get a jump in audio level, which is pretty undesirable. But notice that as I rotate it, it's not doing anything to the level. Keep your eye on this if you can. I'll try and get my hand out of the way. In fact, I'll zoom in for this bit so you can see what I'm doing. Keep your eye on the bottom level there. I'm just doing that. It shouldn't adjust until it sees about -25. There it is. It just picked it up. Did you see that? So now this fader has become active and it's adjusting level. All right. So I'm going to turn that right up there, say high. And now I can come down to my CL16 and hopefully you can see that. And you shouldn't see this adjust, this level here adjust until it reaches that higher level. Okay, nothing's happening, right? As I'm moving that fader. So then as I increase it, it's going to pick up the value. There it is, it's just picked it up. So that is really useful in ensuring that there's a smooth transition when you're controlling from multiple different controller interfaces. Does that answer your question?
It does, and that works from the app as well if you want to show them that.
It works from the app as well. It does. So
yeah,
let's see.
So, and then Marcos, let us know if this answers your question. Marcos had a question about hide faders while using a third-party controller. Soft pickup will just work on whatever you have that's active. So if hide faders are on soft pickup, obviously, since there's no fader control from the app, if that's what you mean.
Yeah. Hide faders means you don't have faders anymore on the SD remote. Yeah. Okay. So that's any more questions on SD remote? As you can see, it's a pretty powerful app now, giving a lot of flexibility. And, you know, it's always been our plan to evolve SD remote, and it will evolve further over time. But right now, it's already very useful tool. Joe, any other questions there?
No, nothing else on the app.
Okay, so I think maybe the best thing right now is to just go a little bit more into the control. Do we need to go into comms, or do we want to focus a bit more on controllers right now? Comms.
Comms.
Okay, cool. So with Scorpio, we have 2 comm sends as well as Slate. With the 888 and 833, you have 1. You have 2 comm returns, and on the Scorpio, and 1 each on the 888 and 833. But let's take a look at the sort of functionality here. Now, you can basically customize your toggle switches here to be your comm send and comm return monitor action switches. By default, you know, this is Slate, you know, that toggle, but I can very quickly do that to do comm send 1, or I can do that to be comm send 2. But I can change the functionality on these toggle switches using, just to let you know, in the system menu, just here, in the system menu, just here, if you go in there, there's something called toggle switch action, okay, which allows you to do all sorts of custom things with these controls. So here you can see, for instance, it's got down the left-hand side, it's got all these different combinations of those 3 toggle switches, okay, and they all offer different possibilities. But for instance, mic, that can be set to be slate latch, slate momentary. Slate momentary means that you have to be holding the switch, which some people prefer because they like to know that they're slating. Some people prefer one-handed operation and latch it. And slate itself is a combination of momentary and latching, whereby if you do a quick flick of the mic toggle, it will latch. And if you hold it for more than half a second, it will be momentary. And you've got those options with all of these things. All right. Notice that I've got a whole bunch of other things. I could make that toggle be ComSend 1 without having to hold the select encoder. So you can set this up the way you want in terms of operating. Whole bunch of other shortcuts you can put on these toggles as well. I'm going to talk about these controls here soon, but essentially what that does allow you to use your select and headphone encoders as two further trim and physical trim and fader controls for more channels. It was a widely used requested feature on the 833, but we also added it to the 888 and Scorpio 2. You've got a bunch of other features here as well. You can add cue marks, delete cue marks. You can create sound reports on these toggles, shortcut to your record folder. So all sorts of things going on. Let's just come back to our menu there. Okay, Slate Comms returns. So the first up in the menu is the what do you want your source for your mic to be for communicating. So there's a really high quality internal mic on the 8 series. It's hard to believe it's an actual internal mic, but you can use that and it's pretty effective. But of course, you can use an external mic plugged into the 5-pin headset port on the left panel here. And you can work with active or passive headsets. Okay. Once you've chosen your source, you can apply gain to it or to adjust the level to your liking. There's plenty of gain there. We added even more gain to that in a previous version of software, so it should be plenty. Now then you have 3 different routing matrices. There's one for slate, which is generally used for general announcements. So generally your routing might look something like that, where you're routing, when you activate that slate mic, it's going to go everywhere, to tracks, to outputs, to buses, to your headphones. But you can customize that and turn, if you don't want it to go to tracks, you can turn them off very easily, etc. All right. You also have your own matrix for ComSend routing here. So when you activate the ComSend 1 shortcut using the toggle switches that you've customized to your liking, you can then choose to send that slate mic signal to any output or bus, or to your headphones, or maybe just to one ear of your headphones if you want side tone, which is preferable. The nice thing about the 8 series as well is we give you the option to either mute or duck the program feed to your buses going out to crew members. So if they want the program feed muted, you can send it to muted, or if they want it ducked, the program still be there, but just lower level, you can send that there, and you can customize that level there using this function, duck bus program by, whenever you activate ComSend 1. And you don't need to have it ducked at all, just set that to 0 dB and then it's not going to duck a call at all. And then obviously, if you're sending to headphone, you might want to, for yourself, duck your own headphone program or not. So that gives a lot of versatility there. And you have the same range of options for ComSend 2 as well. And then you've got dedicated ComReturn ports on your right-hand panel. and return ports, typically used for monitoring return audio from a camera. The nice thing about the 8 series is we actually allow you to route your return feeds to channels. So let's just have a look here, just to prove that. I think you probably saw that before. So here on the bottom row, I've got those returns, A1 through C2, also routable to a channel. So you could use that for 6 further analog inputs. So on the Scorpio, that means you have 22 analog inputs, should you need them. Okay, going back to wherever I was. Oh yeah, comms. And then you can adjust the gain here of your various return ports, but you can apply additional gain once you've routed them to channels. So a lot of flexibility there. What else do we want to say here? So on the actual controllers themselves, you have the ability to, on the CL16, you've got 2 dedicated buttons for COM1 send and COM2 send here, but you can also map any other button to comms as well. So for third-party controllers, like the Sonosax, for instance, you could map COM-send1 to your mic button instead of that being a slate. You can do various things. So this is a nice controller, especially if you're working with the compact 833. It's almost exactly the same width, so it makes for a very neat solution there. Okay, so that's comms. Any questions on that?
Nope, doesn't look like it.
Cool. So we've done all that. Controllers. Should I? Let's see. Should I go through some of the controller stuff on the, or specifically the CL16 at this point?
Anybody have CL16 questions? You guys can start getting those in. Give it a sec, see if anyone has anything.
Let's see if I'm missing anything obvious. No. So could we be done, Joe?
You know,
do we want to?
We might be. We did do an entire deep dive training on the CL16. You guys can find that on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, the actual one thing I should mention that's different for people who are familiar with the CL16 a bit. Well, actually, the 8 series in general, the version 7 firmware that we just released, we did also add the ability to route any input source to channels 17 through 32 as well. So essentially doubling the routing capability of Scorpio, because previously you couldn't route mic inputs, for instance, 1 through 16 to channels 17 through 32. You could only route them to 1 through 16, but now you can take any input source and route them to any channel. And the other thing that we added was trim gain controls on channels 17 through 32. They weren't there previously, and also high pass filters on channels 17 through 32. So that really does expand the capability of Scorpio. I mean, it was already very expansive, but now, yeah, I mean, it's really unbelievably powerful in terms of what you can route and select for things. So.
Just a few last minute questions. We didn't have any, it wasn't just a good spot for him. BK is asking, in RF64, do we know what audio post software the RF64 format works with?
I do. Did we not, have we not put that up online?
I thought so. You guys can find that as a resource. Let me double check though. It should be up there somewhere.
But I can tell you, actually, if you just bear with me for a quick sec. I can just bring up my, let's see. Let's type it. Okay. So I believe that Adobe Audition, Audacity, Pro Tools, QuickTime, Mac Finder, Nuendo, Pyramix, Final Cut Pro support it. Avid doesn't. it's like, it seems like Avid is falling behind the curve at the minute, to be quite honest. I mean, the majority of other systems seem to support all these newer, well, then it's not even new. RF64 has been around for at least 10 years, probably 20 actually. But yeah, so Avid doesn't. Be sure that if in doubt, I would use BWF. And that's the way it's always been done, and post houses are more than capable of it. But if you know that RF64 is supported and you're recording long takes and you know you're definitely going to go past 4 gigabytes, and then use it.
Question from Mark. He says he's waiting on the new Wizzycom 54 for the SL2. Do ports A1 through A4 and B1 through B4 allow the receivers to output AES to the 833 input?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all digital. With the MCR54, it's all digital. So,
question from Marcos: did the VU LED rings follow the peak hold VU decay behavior or base VU signal?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they're. I can't answer that without necessarily giving a false answer. Okay. It is what it is.
Perfect.
If you email me or get Joe to email me, I'll get back to you on that.
Sure. Any last minute questions, anybody? Anything coming through? Thank you all for hanging out with us. I know it's been a long one, but we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, and I still feel like I've scratched the surface.
Oh yeah. So if you guys are interested in more of these trainings in the future, let us know. We might do one that's maybe just a Q&A if everyone has their gear in hand, or if they're thinking of upgrading from a different mixer recorder.
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea, Joe. That's a really good idea.
I think so too. We just can't make it a feature request free for all. Like, oh, can it do this? Yeah, eventually, but we'll make it an actual Q&A. Thank you very much. Yes, Mark, thank you. Can SD Remote create custom colors for faders? No.
It's a good idea.
Since there's issues with Avid keeping up lately, have you considered integrating with Blackmagic's Fairlight over Pro Tools? We'll leave that up to them. Any word on iOS support yet? Yes, it came earlier in the meeting. We'll let you know when it's stable and working. iPad is there, has been for a few versions. Paul said for iPhone, it'll be sometime in the future when it's ready.
And as I've mentioned numerous times, there are still ways you can control from an iPhone if you want to, using the Input Stick app. I know you want SD Remote to be that way, and it's coming, but in the meantime, Input Stick, one of these, gives you a huge amount of control. Whoops, wrong side. A huge amount of control over your 8 series.
It's important to note, Paul is not sponsored by Input Stick. All right. This training should go up online as long as the render comes the right way from Zoom. Hopefully it should be fine.
Okay, I'm just going to leave everyone with one last trick and bit of magic for the day. All right. Okay. So you can see an 888 up there, along with a Scorpio, right? Right. You got that just there.
Yep.
So imagine my 888 is a backup to my Scorpio. No, we all like backup machines, but anyway. I'm going to control both of them simultaneously. See that? No hands. How cool is that? You're going to say, how do you do that? How do you do that? I can do my take list stuff as well. Anyway, that's a bit of food for thought for you guys for the end of the day.
When's Paul's next Pink Floyd live stream? He'll put it in our group because he's using a mixed pre, therefore it counts as Sound Devices content.
Yeah, it's going to be next year now. Our bass player decided to leave us, so we found a new one. He's got to learn it all, and got a new Hammond B3 player as well. Very so nice. Got to get him up to speed.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, keep an eye on our social media. I think also this went out to our mailing list. So if you guys aren't subscribed to our mailing list, it'll let you know about firmware updates. You can find that on your privacy preferences, the contact form on our website. Also, we do encourage you guys to register your product. It extends your warranty from 1 year to 2 years, which is great. Registering your product also makes you, it keeps you up to date when we release firmware. And it's really, really good. It also gives us a little bit of insight into, you know, who out there has our gear and things like that. And it helps us make sure that these things are very much tailored to your interest and your needs. So yeah, keep an eye out. We'll probably do another live stream relatively soon as Paul and I can get together, but thanks. Yes.
Guys, I wish you all the best with finding work in these difficult times. Hopefully we're seeing the industry gradually back. But yeah, I hope you all are finding work and hang in there.
That's it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye.
See ya.